We're in a series right now. It's called Classic Christmas, and we're just looking at some of the movies that we've seen, and we've seen probably many times. And this week, we're going to start with another of those movies. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right, or it could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve hating the Who's, staring down from his cave with a sour, Grinchy frown at the warm lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow's Christmas. It's practically here. Then he growled with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming, I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. Can we just all be honest with each other today? I try to be honest all the time, but I want you to be honest with each other today, all right? How many of you allow Christmas to have a Grinchy effect on you? How many Grinches we got sitting in here? Well, I'm telling you what, you need to be standing up here looking out there. Because there's a lot of the Grinchy frowns going on right now. Right? That's what it is. It seems like Christmas has always had that kind of effect on some people. Think about the classical literature, if you would. How about Ebenezer Scrooge? Where'd Scrooge go? There he is. Ebenezer Scrooge, you know him. And then the children's book, the familiar Grinch that we're talking about right now. Now, in our times, Scrooge and Grinch are often represented by a group or groups like the ACLU. They've threatened people with lawsuits if there's even a mention of Christ in the Christmas season. In Broward County, Florida, this is several years ago, Calvary Chapel. Down there, the county had told them they could not include the words, Jesus is the reason for the season. It couldn't be on their Christmas display, and that display was on their own property. So the church filed a suit in U.S. District Court, claiming they had the right to display those words. And Judge Williams Locke agreed with them on their free speech argument, and he allowed them to keep the words on display as long as they included the words, Calvary Chapel says, before the words, Jesus is the reason for the season. That is horrible. Listen, over 90% of Americans celebrate Christmas. And even though Christianity is the largest religious group in the nation, Jesus has been repeatedly forced into the closet during this time. So much so that the very word Christmas has been removed from the season. And it's been replaced with Happy Holidays. Do you know what I think is so God-honic about that? Do you know what the root is for holiday? Holy day. So even though they're not saying Christmas, they're saying, hey, have a great holy day. I love that. God's got a great sense of humor, but that's how it is. Now, listen, back in 1991, some of you remember that year? Back when you were still allowed to go out of the house without a mask? You remember that? Back in 1991, there was a humorist. His name was Dave Barry, and he poked fun of all of this stuff, and he wrote this. To avoid offending anybody, the school dropped religion altogether and started singing about the weather. At my son's school, they now hold a winter program in February. And they sing increasingly non-memorable songs such as Winter Wonderland, Frosty the Snowman, and catch this. This is a real song. You ready? Susie Snowflake. I've not heard that one. All of which is pretty funny, David says, because we live in Miami. So if we had a visitor from another planet that would come, they would assume that the children belong to the Church of Meteorology. I just find that humorous. But folks, listen, there is something about the story of the birth of Jesus that just creates animosity in some people. Let me put it this way. The birth of Jesus is polarizing. We sit here this morning and we embrace the birth of Jesus. But you will find those in your circle of friends, you will find those even in your family, those you go to school with, those you work with, who want nothing to do with it. And so it's either all for or all against. There is no in between. But what is it about this story, about this season, that causes this animosity? James Martin, a friend of mine, he made a trip to the Holy Land and he bought a nativity set for his Sunday school class. It was carved out of olive wood in Bethlehem. And the creche had all the traditional figures, the sheep and the oxen, the wise men, the shepherds, Mary, Joseph, and of course, baby Jesus. And on the return trip, the security at Tel Aviv airport was very strict. And he says, I remember thinking they would not trouble to examine the nativity set because it's so innocent, right? But they did. Each figure was carefully scrutinized and even taken away for X-ray examination. You see, said the security officer, we must make sure there's nothing explosive in them. And I just got to laugh. Because when you start to tell the story of Jesus and you have the manger scene, what happens? There's an explosion, right? It just is a matter of story. And there is nowhere that this explosiveness is more obvious than in the scriptures. Open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 2. We're going to read quite a bit there, Matthew chapter 2. There is nowhere more explosive than in the story of Herod. Matthew chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from the eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, where's this newborn king of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we've come to worship him. Well, King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of the religious law and asked, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? In Bethlehem in Judea, they said, for this is what the prophet wrote. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah, for a ruler will come from you who will be the shepherd for my people Israel. Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. And he told them, go to Bethlehem and search carefully for this child. And when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too. After this interview, the wise men went on their way. The star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshiped him. Then they opened their treasure chest, and they gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When it was time to leave, they returned to their country by another route. For God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod. And after the wise men were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. He said, get up, flee to Egypt with the child and his mother, the angel said, and stay there until I tell you to return, because Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. Well, that night Joseph left for Egypt with the child and Mary, his mother, and they stayed there until Herod's death. This fulfilled what the Lord had spoken through the prophet. I called my son out of Egypt. Herod was furious when he realized that the wise men had outwitted him. And he sent soldiers to kill all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were under 2 years old and under, based on the wise men's report of the star's first appearance. Herod's brutal action fulfilled what God had spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A cry was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning. Rachel weeps for her children, refusing to be comforted, for they are dead. Herod, he was a great king. He really was. He did some wonderful things. But Herod was also the original Grinch. about it, what he was trying to do. He was the original Grinch. He had done some great things. He had some wonderful accomplishments. He doubled the size of the temple. He built numerous palaces and fortifications. He kept Palestine relatively at peace with everybody around him during his reign. Once there was a famine that came in and was just disastrous for Israel, he took money from his own treasury to buy food for the Jews. He did some very awesome things for the Jews. But what is Herod most noted for? What do we know the name Herod for? He had every baby in and around Bethlehem under the age of 2 killed. That's what we know of Herod. That's what we see. And let me tell you, let's put in today's terminology, that's genocide. That was genocide. He had the babies killed for no reason, innocent little kids. King Herod, listen, he was a king in the land when Jesus was born, right? But he wasn't king because of his right of birth. He was not even an Israelite. He was an Edomite. And he was a ruler of the land only because Rome had chosen to give him this territory to rule, which is a territory nobody wanted, by the way. But he was given it. So he was a ruler of the land just because Rome had given it to him. And he called himself the Great. You know? He was a great king. So why would a successful, wealthy, compassionate king be so upset with a baby born in Bethlehem? So upset that he is willing to massacre every child in the village to make sure he destroyed the one single helpless child. Well, Scripture doesn't tell us why. I'll let you know that. But history gives us a pretty good picture of this wicked king's motivation. Herod had a reputation. And his reputation was for jealousy and protecting his power and protecting his position. As a matter of fact, when his 16-year-old brother-in-law tried to make a name for himself, Herod playfully held his head underwater until he drowned and died. Think about that. That's a 16-year-old kid. Years later, one of his many wives, her name was Miriam, she became involved in a plot to have her family kind of raise up into some power. She was his favorite wife. But he had her executed. He killed her. And then a couple of years before his death, he had heard rumors that two of his sons, Aristobulus and Antipater, were engaged in a plot to kill him. So what did he do? He executed them. His sons, he executed them. I love this. Caesar Augustus said this after the sons were executed. This is what Caesar Augustus said. It is safer to be Herod's pig than to be Herod's son. How would you want to be known for that? See, what Herod's main motivation in life was to stay in control of his life. Anything or anyone that threatened his authority would face his wrath. He would do anything in his power to destroy whatever endangered his ability to stay in control of his life. Now here, the root of Herod's motivation, it goes to the heart. The heart. And that's exactly why there are so many people today, still today, that oppose Christmas. It's a heart issue. Do you understand that people will embrace Kwanzaa? That's a celebration created by and for the black community. Or Hanukkah. It's a religious holiday celebrated by the Jewish community. But let somebody bring up the story of Jesus and watch the fireworks begin. And why is it? Why does that happen? And I believe people are no different than Herod was. People are no different than the Grinch, right? They have a heart problem. It's a heart problem. People who have a problem with a baby Jesus have a heart problem. You remember the words in the story of the Grinch? His heart was 2 sizes too small. Well, Herod's heart was at least 2 sizes too small for anyone else but him to rule in his life. There just wasn't any room. There was no space. And that's why so many others actually still today reject the Christ child. There's no room in their heart. You see, to acknowledge him, to be what the Christmas story says he would be, is to acknowledge that Jesus has a right to the hearts and to the minds of men and women. But there's no room in the hearts for this message. There's no room in people's lives and hearts today for God to rule. That's why many of the Christmas carols we sing, how many of you love to sing Christmas carols? Oh, I love to sing the carols, and you know how badly I sing, so I make a joyful noise. But we've been singing them so long, we don't often give much thought to the words because we've sung them so much, right? But I want you to give some serious thought to these words that are going to come up on the screen for you. Ready? What child is this who laid to rest on Mary's lap is sleeping, whom angels greet with anthems sweet, while shepherds watch are keeping? This is the Christ the King, whom shepherds guard and angels sing. Haste, haste to bring him laud, the babe, the son of Mary. Or how about this one? Oh, come all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant. O come ye to Bethlehem. Come and behold him born, the King of angels. Oh, come let us adore him. Oh, come let us adore him. Oh, come let us adore him, Christ the Lord. Or there's one more here. Hark the herald angels sing. Glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild. God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all ye nations rise. Join the triumph in the skies. With angelic host proclaims Christ is born in Bethlehem. Hark the herald angels sing. Glory to the newborn King. Did you hear the message that come through those songs? It's amazing to me. Christ the King, King of angels, God and sinners reconciled. You see, this baby Jesus is receiving the praise of both men and angels. Christmas carols, and I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but Christmas carols declare the divinity of Christ. That's why we sing them. They declare the divinity of Christ. They literally shout out that Jesus is the Son of God, born to be the King in our lives. In truth be known, he was born to be the King of each and every human being's life. But they have to let him. So the question to ponder today, how do we change the size of a heart? Maybe we need to change the size of our heart. Maybe our hearts during this season, we're just 2 sizes too small as well. How do we change a heart? How do we change the hearts of those that are involved in our circles of influence who are just like Grinch during this year? How do we change the size of people's hearts? You remember how the Grinch's heart was changed? 10,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh-pooh to the whoos, he was grinchiously humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two, and then all the whoos in Whoville will cry, boo-hoo. That's a noise grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started low, then started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, the sound sounded merry. It couldn't be, but it was merry, very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled for hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light. And he brought back the toys and the food for the feast, and he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. What changed the Grinch's heart? A baby born in a manger 2,000 years ago came for that purpose, to change hearts. That's why he's here, to change hearts. I told you, I'm just going to be brutally honest. For many years, I was Grinch. If my wife was here, she would testify. I even thought about bringing her on stage and letting her tell you how bad it really was. I was just Grinch. I just hated the season. And I blamed it on the commercialization, right? I blamed it because there was so much going on in the world and they commercialized everything. That's what I blamed it on. No, it was a heart issue. It was a heart issue. And I had to allow Jesus to change my heart as well. I don't know if you understand, but the story of Grinch, man, this is a beautiful theological story. What changed the heart of the Grinch? It wasn't the ribbons, it wasn't the tags, it wasn't the packages, boxes, or bags. It was a witness of the people down in Whoville. The witness of the people that the Grinch had always hated because of the Christmas they celebrated. That sound like Dr. Seuss? You see, it was the singing of the Who's down in Whoville. It was the joy that they expressed, the joy that they had as he looked down and began to understand this is what Christmas is about. It's not the packages, the boxes, the bags. It was the joy and the singing that changed the Grinch. When I was in Canton ministering there was a lady who served on a lot of different civic committees, and she came to John, the pastor, because she was asked to select some carols to sing around a community Christmas tree lighting. And so he picked out the songs and gave her the selection that he had made, and she was upset. She's so frustrated. And then she cried out, "They are all so theological." And John's a lot like Derek. You know, he can just turn anything into a smile. And so he just he looked at her and he had this smug grin on his face and he said, "Yeah, aren't they though?" Folks, listen. This is a woman who had missed the point of the songs. Christmas for her wasn't about Jesus. Her kind of Christmas would never change the heart of a Grinch. Her kind of Christmas would never change the world because her kind of Christmas would never challenge people to look at their hearts. It's only the story of a changed heart that makes a difference in this world. You've heard me say this before, that changed hearts change hearts. There's a guy by the name of Brian Welch. His name's Brian Head Welch, if you've ever heard of him. He was a lead guitarist for a heavy metal group called Korn for many years. And on February 22nd, 2005, Brian the Head Welch announced, and I love this quote, he had chosen the Lord Jesus Christ as his Savior and would be dedicating his musical pursuits to that end. He announced he was formally leaving Korn. And the initial speculation was that this was a hoax or a practical joke, but they were all proven wrong. He has turned highly, I'll use the word spiritual. He was even baptized in the Jordan River. And he speaks openly about his faith. And he speaks openly about the conversion that he's gone through. And he does a lot of this on his website. And he stated that one of the reasons that really kind of triggered him to look at his heart was he heard his daughter one evening reciting the songs, the obscene songs of Korn. And then on top of that, he himself was fighting a crystal meth addiction. So it caused him to look at his heart. This is the band's first lineup change in their history. And Brian's website, about a year and a half ago, got hacked. And when it got hacked, people said that he was coming back. They were posing as Brian. They said he was coming back and he was going to rejoin Korn. But the lead singer, Jonathan, and as well as Brian said, nope, that's not happening. That's false. Brian has also said on his website, speaking about the guys in Korn, he says, I love those guys. And my prayer is that one day, they too will find Jesus. That's an amazing story to me. North American Christian Convention here in Indianapolis a few years ago, I had the opportunity to meet with Brian Head Welch. We walked down the hallway together. It was a very interesting conversation. That man is on fire for Jesus. And he came from a place that you and I wouldn't understand. It's amazing what God can do with a changed heart. God's always specialized in changing the hearts of men. But we have to be open and we have to be willing. So if you're sitting here with a frown on your face today, God's going to change your heart if you let him. You'll leave here with joy in your heart. You'll leave here with a smile on your face because that's what he does. That's how it works. See, but look back at our story with Herod, the original Grinch. He didn't change. His heart never changed. He didn't allow this baby Jesus. And you know what history tells us? History tells us that when he died, the dogs lapped up his blood. Then there's another guy in the Bible. It's amazing. This guy persecuted the church. He killed Christians for a living. That's what he did. And then this baby Jesus, who had now grown and died on the cross and had gone to heaven, but he appeared to this man. And Saul became Paul. And from persecutor to preacher. And probably the greatest preacher missionary that the church has ever known. But because he allowed God to change his heart. And he did. And then this guitarist named Brian Head Welch. Let me tell you something that I love about this guy. You ready? He is a foster parent to 212 Indian children. That amazes me. Only God could do that. Only God could change a heart. Only God could grow a heart 3 sizes in one day. And this morning, I'm going to tell you what. If you're sitting here and you're Grinch, you need to let God change your heart. You need to let God change your heart as you look at that baby in the manger, understanding that's why he came. He came for you and me. He didn't stay a baby. We know that. He grew up. He ended up dying on a cross for you and me, and that we talk about that each week at communion time. But it all began in a manger. Here's where we need to be today. We need to be who's. Are you ready to be a who? Some of us can look like who's. You ever look at those who's? Woo! We need to be who's. And what do I mean by that? We need to be joyful. We need to be singing. We need to let people see the joy that we have during this Christmas season and to know that that joy is not because of a wrap package I got, but it's because of the baby that was born in the manger. Jesus is the reason for this season. Now, I know that you and I cannot change hearts. We do not have that power. We don't have that ability. Jesus does. But what we can do is we can create an environment and we can get the soil fertile so that people are ready to have that heart transplant. And we do that through joy and through singing. And we have an opportunity to prepare the hearts of people. They may be family, they may be friends, they may be schoolmates, they may be people you work with, but when they see the joy in your heart and they hear you humming those songs, you've just softened their heart some. so that Jesus might come in and change their heart. We can't change the hearts, but we can help prepare the soil so Jesus can change their hearts.